Wanted to talk for a second about passive investing or index investing versus active investing. And I'd like to take a minute and address this because it's something that seems to always come up, especially when the market's going up. It seems like every day the conventional wisdom or the thought is just put all your money in an index or a non-managed type investment versus an active investor where you're hiring a manager because all it does is go up when the market goes up. And I think that the common thought is that active investing or hiring a manager, or the sole purpose in that is to try to beat the market or beat an index. And while that may be true with a true like growth fund type manager who is trying to match or beat the market, that's usually not what active management is about. Active management is more about risk mitigation. In other words, trying to get some of the return of the market, definitely to grow your money, but maybe being able to achieve some type of downturn or downside protection, mitigating on the downside. And the easiest way to think about that is to think about a retired investor. A retired investor is probably not going to want to try to beat the market and have maximum losses. They're probably trying to get some fair, reasonable return and avoid some of the downside that can really hurt when you're not working and you're no longer investing. So, and then also along that line, active investing can also help avoiding overconcentration in a specific number of stocks or a sector. During times like the recent market upside, a particular sector like say technology, those companies or that handful of companies represent a large concentration of the calculation of the index of say the S&P 500, where a managed investing or a non-passive type investment can maybe pick and choose and not be so over concentrated and maybe possibly being more at risk and can be more risk averse. And then active investing can also help with volatility. Many investors want the returns of investing in an index, but they can't stand the heat, so they got to get out of the kitchen. And in other words, just because an index may return 12, 13, 14% average return over the next 20 years doesn't mean for most investors that they're ever going to see those returns, because they're not going to be able to stand to stay in the game when the going gets tough and it's down 50%. So those are some reasons why active investing may be used sometimes, and its primary objective is not always trying to beat the market return. Passive index may very likely exceed returns of active management managers, and there's study after study that says that's the case, and in many cases that is accurate. Those studies are true, but there's some caveats to that. For young investors, maybe it doesn't matter so much just putting it in an index and letting it ride because they got 20, 30, 40 years. But some caveats to that idea or that popular opinion is you have to be willing, if you're going to index invest and ride the wave, you got to be willing to tolerate 30 to 60 to 70% downside events that might happen once or twice during your lifetime of investing. You have to be willing to not bail or get out of your investments no matter what happens. You have to be the type of person that can ignore every headline, every major chaos in the market and ride it out. You also need to be in a position where you won't need any of that money for half a decade, 2 decades because of the volatility in that investment and possibly having to sell when things are way down. You also have to be in a position where you're not going to be drawing regular income or regular withdrawals out of your investments, because that will have an outsized impact with index investing and the volatility. And then lastly, in an index type scenario versus a managed type scenario, you have to be willing to own everything. And I always use the analogy of a salad bar. owning the index is like me going up to the salad bar buffet on your behalf and saying, do you want a salad? And I proceed to put cottage cheese on it, olives, bell peppers, lettuce, ranch dressing, Thousand Island dressing. I put everything on there. And you're like, I only like half of that stuff you put on there. With a manager or managed investment, you and or the manager and your advisor are being more selective with what you're owning in the portfolio. So again, in the headlines right now, passive versus index investing is all the rage, what people are talking about. But just remember, there's a place for both, and it's totally dependent on an investor's situation, their risk appetite, their timeline, and lots of other different scenarios.